The wind swept sharp and parched across the high grasslands, whispering through tall blue stem and patches of milkweed, as if the earth itself held a grudge it couldn't voice. Dust lingered like a sigh caught in the throat, and the sun, swollen and crimson, sank behind the jagged hills above Thornfield Hollow, casting every sagebrush in a glow like embers of a fire long extinguished. Elias Thornfield rode unsteady, his saddle groaning under him, his brimmed hat tilted against the glare. The sky stretched wide enough to bury sorrow whole. And maybe it had once, his, and others too. The ground here split like weathered leather, scorched to the point of breaking. It hadn't rained proper in a month. Not since the chapel bell in town cracked during a thunderstorm, and the old postmaster called it a dark omen. Elias didn't put much stock in signs, but he trusted the land, how it held the memory of every step, every secret buried beneath. He swung down by the paddock, his boots hitting the dirt with a weight heavier than his frame. 6 years he'd carried something unseen, woven into the quiet of his days. He patted his mare's flank, letting her amble to the water trough, and headed to the house through the side gate, past the stacked firewood, past the bench swing where his wife used to sit, her shawl catching the breeze. The swing still swayed when the wind hit just right. But something was wrong today. The root cellar door hung ajar, its hinges creaking faintly. Elias set down the grain sack he'd brought from town, brushed back his coat, and drew the old shotgun from its place by the door. Each step toward the cellar was careful, measured, not fearful but ready. He eased the door open with the barrel. The smell came first, not decay, but the sour tang of overripe pears. Then a sound, shallow breathing, like someone trying to hush their own lungs. He stepped inside. There, crouched between crates, were 3 figures, sisters by the look of them, their faces shadowed but alike. The eldest, maybe 19, clutched a bruised pear. The middle one, a year or 2 younger, gripped a rusted knife, her knuckles white. The youngest, barely 16, hugged her knees, her eyes wide and unblinking. Their clothes were tattered, their braids loose and matted, as if they'd been running through brambles for days. Elias kept the shotgun steady but didn't speak. The eldest met his gaze, her jaw set, like she'd already braced for what came next. "We ain't thieves," she said, voice low, as if it didn't matter if he believed her. "Just hungry." He held the barrel a moment longer, then lowered it. "You're on my land," he said. The eldest nodded. "We know." He studied them, their faces gaunt but fierce, grief carved into their eyes. "What happened?" The middle sister spoke, her voice sharp. "Our folks are gone. Fire took the house 3 days back." Elias tilted his head. "You expect me to buy that, today of all days?" The youngest shook her head, her voice barely a whisper. "It's no lie, sir." The pear in the eldest's hand trembled. Elias sighed and stepped back. "Come inside." They hesitated, the middle one's grip tightening on her knife, but the eldest nudged her sisters. They stood, legs wobbly but unyielding, and followed him up the creaking stairs, moving like they'd walked 1,000 miles with nowhere to land. In the kitchen, Elias set 3 plates on the table, bread, dried venison, a hunk of cheese. The sisters sat, but didn't touch the food, their eyes darting between him and the door. "I ain't stopping you," Elias said, leaning against the counter, arms crossed. The eldest looked at him, suspicion softening into something else. Hunger won. They ate slowly, each bite deliberate, like they expected the plates to vanish. The youngest chewed with her head down, the middle one kept her knife close, and the eldest watched Elias like a hawk. "Names?" he asked. The eldest swallowed. "Clara." She nodded to her sisters. "Lila and Tess." "Elias," he said, nodding back. Clara glanced at the cellar door, her shoulders hunching. "We didn't mean trouble." "You caused it," he said, his tone even. "But I've seen worse." Silence settled, heavy but not unkind. Outside, the wind rattled brittle branches against the window. The sisters finished, wiping their mouths on sleeves torn and stained. Elias noticed a smear of dried blood on Lila's cuff, but held his tongue. "You got kin anywhere?" he asked. Clara shook her head. "Just us now." He didn't press. They looked brittle, like one wrong word might break them. "Barn's got blankets in the loft. Sleep there. Don't touch the horses." Tessa's eyes flicked up, soft and grateful. "Thank you." He didn't reply, just turned to the window, watching clouds drift over the hills like they'd forgotten how to rain. The sisters rose, moving stiffly, and the screen door creaked as they left. Elias stood on the porch later, the night settling cold and thin. Through the barn slats, he saw them curled in the hay, Clara's arm around Tess, Lila's knife still in hand. They weren't asleep, just still. Come morning, he thought they'd be gone, but he found them by the henhouse, gathering eggs with careful hands. Clara's braid was tidier, Lila's scowl a little softer, Tessa's face less pale. Elias nodded, saying nothing, and they set the basket on the back step like an offering. For 3 days, they worked in near silence, mucking stalls, splitting kindling poorly, earning blisters. Elias found a box of old boots in the cellar, too big for their feet, but they stuffed them with rags. On the 4th morning, Tess hummed a faint tune. On the 5th, Elias caught Lila crying behind the hayricks, her knife discarded in the dirt. She scrubbed her face when she saw him, muttering, "Dust in my eyes." He didn't argue. That night, he left 3 blankets by the hearth. By morning, they were gone. Saturday, Elias rode to town for supplies. When he returned, the sisters sat on the porch steps, arms around each other, like they expected to be sent packing. Clara spoke, eyes on the ground. "They buried our parents yesterday. Some preacher said words, tossed dirt, and left." Lila added, voice tight, "Sheriff said we can't stay in the hills alone. Said it ain't right for girls like us." Elias sat beside them, the porch groaning. "No one came for you?" Tess shook her head. "No one. How long you walk?" 2 days, Clara said. "No shoes." He glanced at their rag-wrapped feet, then out at the ridge. A raven cawed from a scrub oak. A coyote yipped in the distance. "Your mother, what was she like?" Clara's mouth softened. "Gentle hands. Even when she was cross." Elias nodded. "Mine too." Lila looked at him, hesitant. "You still got yours?" "Long gone. Wife too." Tessa's voice was small. "Does it get easier?" "No," Elias said. "But it gets quieter." Clara's eyes shimmered, but she blinked it away. She stood, steadier now. "We'll finish the eggs." They walked off, their steps surer. That night, Elias found 3 biscuits wrapped in cloth on his workbench, still warm. He didn't mention it, but the next morning, he set 4 plates on the table. At supper, the 3 sisters, Clara, Lila, and Tess, sat around the oak table in Elias Thornfield's kitchen, the firelight casting their shadows long and thin. Clara, the eldest, spoke first, her voice steady but catching when she mentioned their father. "He whittled combs from cedar scraps," she said, "each one smooth as river stone." Lila nodded, adding, "He'd hum while he worked, old hymns off-key." Tess, the youngest, clutched her fork, her eyes distant. "He'd give them to us, one for each birthday." Elias listened, his calloused hands still, his coffee cooling untouched. As the moon rose, bathing the hills of Thornfield Hollow in silver, Clara leaned back and asked, "You think they'd mind us staying here?" Elias met her gaze, his voice low. "Don't matter what they think." Lila gave a small, crooked smile. Tessa's eyes softened, but none of them saw the dust trail rising on the road. Hoofbeats thundering, closing in fast on the hollow. The morning mist clung to the grass when the sisters stepped out, barefoot, into the dew-soaked yard. The air carried the scent of sagebrush and faint char from a far-off chimney. Elias watched from the porch, his mug warming his palms, as the 3 moved with a shared caution, like they were still proving their right to be there. Clara's patched skirt swayed as she gathered eggs from the henhouse, her hands gentle but precise. Lila, her braid half unraveled, hauled water from the pump, her jaw set against the world. Tess, slight and quiet, swept the porch with a worn broom, leaving more dust than she cleared. Their rhythm with Elias was wordless, nods, glances, tasks shared like threads in a quilt. Clara caught his eye and offered a nod. He nodded back. That was enough. By noon, the air thickened with heat. Elias hammered a loose board on the barn while the sisters worked nearby. Clara weeding the old garden, Lila stacking firewood, Tess scattering feed for the hens. Their hands were raw, blisters blooming red. They didn't complain, and Elias didn't offer salve, not yet. At the table, he set out 4 plates, biscuits, smoked mutton, a wedge of cheese. The sisters sat, waiting, their eyes flicking to the food. "Eat," Elias said, jerking his head. Clara murmured thanks. Lila's fingers twitched toward her knife, and Tess kept her gaze low. A locust hummed outside. "Storm's coming," Elias said, glancing at the dry window. Lila looked up. "About time." He sipped his coffee. "You ever plan anything?" Clara shook her head. "Never stayed long enough." Elias shrugged, his tone light as dust. "You could." Tess crumbled her biscuit into tiny pieces, like hope was too sharp to hold whole. That evening, the storm rolled in, not loud but muttering, like the hills were gossiping with the sky. Elias stabled the horses while the sisters stood under the eaves, palms up to catch the first drops. Clara's face softened, Lila's shoulders eased, and Tess smiled, like the rain was a blessing they'd forgotten how to receive. "Scared of lightning?" Elias asked over the wind. Clara shook her head. It's just the world clearing its throat. He liked how she spoke, like every word carried weight. That night, they slept inside, not in the spare room, but on quilts by the hearth. They didn't ask, and he didn't offer. When the thunder grew sharp and rain soaked their clothes, he pointed to the firewood basket and blankets. It was enough. Come morning, the sisters folded the quilts with care, like they were handling something sacred, then went to work, Clara milking the cow, Lila mending a fence, Tess scattering grain. When Elias rode to town, he asked if they wanted to come. Clara hesitated, Lila's eyes narrowed, but Tess nodded. You'll need boots, he said. Lila opened her mouth to argue, but his steady gaze stopped her. We'll try, Clara said. They rode together, the sisters clinging lightly to the saddle behind him, the town of Dustwick sprawling in a valley of scrub oak and chimney smoke. The main street held weathered signs, hitching posts, and eyes that lingered too long. Clara kept her head down, Lila's hands tightened on Elias's coat, and Tess stared at the ground as they passed the feed store, the cooper's shop, the tavern. Elias slowed the horse just enough for them to breathe. At the mercantile, he handed Clara a list, flour, salt, hinges, and a coin. If anyone speaks, don't answer, he said. Lila finished his thought, we won't. He nodded and stepped away to talk with the storekeep. Inside, the sisters moved carefully, aware of every stare. Widow Margaret Hale lingered by the molasses jars, her voice syrupy. Ain't those Elias Thornfield's girls? A man nearby muttered, look half feral. Clara kept her eyes on the shelves, Lila's hand hovered near her knife, and Tess clutched the list like a shield. As they paid, Tucker sauntered in, hat cocked, grin sharp. At 20, he walked like he owned the dirt under his boots. Well, if it ain't the barn brats, he drawled. Thornfield keeping strays now. The sisters stayed silent. What's he feeding you, table scraps or his bed? Cal pressed louder. The sack in Clara's arms tore, sugar spilling like snow across the floor. She knelt, gathering it with shaking hands, Lila and Tess beside her. Elias stepped in, his shadow filling the doorway. He didn't shout, didn't draw his pistol, just fixed Cal with a stare cold as iron. Break my gate again, boy, and I'll take your horse. Cal backed off, pride masking his retreat. The sisters and Elias left together, their silence not strained but woven tight, like a knot that wouldn't slip. Back at the hollow, they worked without speaking, Clara scrubbing the porch, Lila hauling water, Tess feeding the hens. That evening, Clara said, we didn't cry. Her voice was firm, but her eyes gleamed. Lila added, didn't need to. Elias sat on the steps beside them, the air heavy with leather and dust. The sun dipped low. They've already decided what we are, Tess whispered, defiant. Elias leaned back. So decide who you are first. Make him wrong. Clara looked at him, truly looked, like she saw someone who'd been there all along. That simple? She asked. No, he said. But it's yours. That night, the sisters found an old can of paint in the shed and started on the barn, the faded red streaking under their brushes. They worked past dusk, their arms moving in rhythm, Clara steady, Lila fierce, Tess careful. Elias watched from the kitchen window, leaving 3 glasses of water on the step. When they found them, they sat, not drinking, just holding the cool glass like it was proof of something. Later, Clara asked about the garden out back, barren rows, a bent trowel half buried. Yours? She asked. My wife's, Elias said. Lila tilted her head. She die mad at you? His brow creased. No, she died loving me more than I deserved. Tess knelt by the dead rose bushes, sifting the dry soil. Love's like planting, she said softly. You don't know what'll grow. Elias didn't answer, but his gaze softened. In the days that followed, the sisters cleared the garden, gathering sage seeds and old potato eyes, whispering to the earth like it might recall how to bloom. Elias Thornfield saw how the 3 sisters, Clara, Lila, and Tess, carried their sorrow like a torch burning at both ends, consuming night and memory in one fierce glow. One morning, Clara brought in a bundle of wild lavender, setting it on the kitchen table. Good for calming, for sleep, she said. Elias nodded, picked up a sprig, and tucked it behind his ear without a word. Tess smiled faintly, the first crack in her guarded expression in days, but Lila's eyes stayed sharp, scanning the horizon. The next morning, the air hung heavy, windless. A note fluttered on the barn door, pinned there despite the stillness. Elias pulled it free. No name, just 2 words scrawled in a jagged hand, keep them. He turned, and the sisters stood behind him, Clara's face pale as the paper, Lila's hands clenched, Tessa's eyes wide. You said it didn't matter, Clara whispered. But it does. Elias's chest tightened. You belong here, he said. They didn't answer, just turned back to the house, the screen door sighing shut behind them. The morning was still, the cottonwoods holding their breath. Inside, Clara stood before the crooked mirror in the hall, tracing the frayed hem of her too-short dress. Lila adjusted Tessa's patched skirt, her fingers quick but gentle. Their eyes avoided their own reflections, holding secrets they weren't ready to name. From the porch, Elias's voice came low and steady. We ride at 10. Sheriff's got seed packets for trade, said to grab, and before they rot. Clara nodded, Lila tightened her braid, and Tess tied a faded scarf around her neck. They lived in the spaces between words now, where Elias's silence meant trust he'd never voice. He showed it instead, waiting as Lila learned to drive a nail straight, not commenting when Tess left the table early, her throat too tight for food, or when Clara lingered by the garden, staring at nothing. Elias handed them each a folded kerchief, blue, green, yellow, ones they'd hung on the line weeks ago, thinking no one noticed. Dust'll kick up soon, he said. They rode side by side, the sisters sharing a mare, their silence comfortable. The horse's hooves beat a rhythm on the packed dirt, the world passing in sunlit flashes, sagging fences, jackrabbits darting, a red-tailed hawk circling lazy above. Dustwick wasn't kinder this time. Its windows glared, its doors muttered as they shut. Elias tied the reins outside the mercantile and handed Clara a list, flour, molasses, nails. You don't owe him your story, he said, almost as an afterthought. Lila's jaw tightened, but she nodded, clutching the paper like it anchored her. Inside, the store smelled of leather and stale coffee. Dust motes drifted in the light, and a clock ticked too slow. The sisters moved through the aisles, Clara grabbing flour, Lila picking up molasses, Tess reaching for nails. Eyes followed them, heavy as heat on a bruise. Thornfield's girls, someone muttered near the salt barrels, the words sharp in their softness. Widow Margaret Hale's laugh cut through, brittle as dry sage. Can't save every stray, she said to the air. The sisters kept moving, faces blank, but Tessa's fingers trembled on the nail tin. At the counter, the clerk hesitated. Got coin? He asked, voice loud enough to draw eyes. Clara slid over the dollar Elias gave them. The clerk counted it twice, bagged the goods, no smile, no thanks. Outside, the noon sun burned white. Clara's hands shook, not fear, but a quiet rage at how shame could sprout unbidden. Elias joined them, his face calm. You all right? Lila nodded, but the air around her crackled. As they passed the cooper's shop, a voice slunk out from an alley. Thought strays weren't allowed in town no more. Cal Tucker leaned on a fence, chewing tobacco, his boots too clean for a working man. Come on, he grinned. Ain't polite to ignore folks. The sisters stiffened. Elias kept the horse moving, tipping his hat without a glance. Cal stepped forward. I'm just saying, if you're looking to eat, the tavern's hiring girls. Elias stopped. He didn't turn, didn't draw his revolver, just let the silence bite. Clara turned slowly, her voice low and clear. You hungry for trouble or just lonesome? Cal's grin faltered. Elias faced him now, eyes hard as flint. Try that mouth again, boy, without your pa's name to hide behind. Cal spit, turned and slunk off. They rode back in silence. At the hollow, the sisters slid off the mare and went straight to the garden. Clara yanked weeds with fierce precision, Lila dug too deep, Tess scattered seeds like they might save her. Elias watched from the porch, the sun carving long shadows. After a while, he sat beside them. Shouldn't have let you go, he said. Lila didn't look up. We needed to. Clara's voice was soft. I hate how they look at us, like we're already guilty. Elias sifted dirt through his fingers. They looked at me like that when my wife died. Like I broke her. Tess glanced at him. I don't want it to take years to stop caring. He plucked a thorn from her sleeve. Then don't let him name you. Clara met his eyes. What name do we take? One that's yours, he said. Grow into it. That night, the sisters baked cornbread, dry, a little charred, but Elias ate it like a feast. Clara sat taller, Lila's hands steadied. Tess passed the butter without being asked. We want to go back next week, Clara said. Elias nodded, no questions. Days later, while cleaning the barn, Lila found a satchel behind a beam, a leather-bound journal inside, the name Amara Thornfield in faded ink. Beneath it, a line, the earth holds all things, even mercy. Clara asked about it that night. Did Amara write much? Elias stared at the fire. Some. Things too gentle to say out loud. You read it? Lila pressed. Once. It made me miss the part of her that forgave me. Tessa's voice was soft. She sounds like she believed in new starts. Elias nodded. She did. A knock broke the quiet, one hard rap on the door. Elias rose, the sisters freezing. Sheriff Amos Creed stood outside, hat in hand, dust on his boots. "Evenin', Elias," he said. Elias nodded. "Amos." The sheriff glanced at the sisters, standing now tense. "Need a word." They stepped onto the porch, the door creaking shut. The sisters waited, voices muffled but heavy. When Elias returned, he moved slower. "Town's riled again," he said. "Another note. Says if I keep you, they'll cut trade." Clara's eyes burned. "Will you send us off?" "No," he said. "But it'll get rough." Lila nodded. "We've seen rough." Elias pulled Amara's journal from his pocket, set it on the table. "If you're staying, know the woman this house remembers." Clara opened it, reading. "Pain's a seed, meant to grow into something else." She closed it, held it close, and whispered, "We'll try." Outside, a lantern swayed, its light pooling on the porch. Just beyond, something glinted in the dirt, a shard of glass, or maybe a mirror, left there with intent. The next morning, the sun rose rust-red, the air thick, like the earth was bracing. Storms always came quiet first in this country. The sisters knelt in the garden, hands deep in soil, coaxing green from stubborn dirt. Clara's onions sprouted crooked but alive, Lila's sage held firm, Tessa's wildflowers bloomed defiant. Elias watched from the porch, his tin cup dented but warm. He'd stopped asking why they dug so much. Planting didn't judge, didn't whisper, didn't turn away. Clara stood, brushing mud from her elbows. "I'm going to town alone today," she said, Lila and Tess nodding behind her. Elias set his cup down. "Sure." Clara's face held no tremor. "If we don't walk in ourselves, they'll always wait for you to pull us." He handed her Amara's satchel. Lila tied her green kerchief, Tess her yellow one. They looked older, not in years, but in resolve. "You know they'll try something," Elias said. Clara's lips curved. "I'm counting on it." He touched her shoulder lightly. "Don't bite." Lila grinned. "We'll dig under." They rode off, dust trailing like a promise. By noon, Dustwick buzzed with murmurs. The sisters tied the mare and entered the mercantile, the bell jangling sharp. Cal Tucker lounged by the counter, his cronies near the seed bins. Clara picked up lamp oil, Lila grabbed sugar, Tess took clothes pins. The clerk eyed their coin, bagging slow. Cal's voice cut through. "Didn't think strays had coin. Earning it behind the barn." Lila paused, fingers tight on the satchel. "Didn't know mules could talk," she said, not turning. Cal grabbed her wrist. The satchel tipped, oil spilled, sugar scattered. The room stilled. Widow Hale lit a cigarette, smirking. "Sheriff's out back." Tess stepped forward, voice low. "My father taught us to skin a coyote in 5 minutes. Think we can't handle something smaller?" Cal's grip faltered. Clara picked up the oil and sugar, faced the clerk. "We'll come back with coin. Or not." They walked out, the door slamming like a judge's gavel. Clouds loomed dark as they rode home. Elias waited outside, reading the sky. They handed him the oil, the torn sugar sack. "No clothes pins," Lila said. He took the goods, no questions. Clara sat on the steps, pulling off her boots. "I wanted them to say worse. Something we could fight." Elias sat beside her. "You want to fight, you'll get one. This town don't quit." Lila nodded, Tessa's eyes gleamed, and Clara said, "Good. Neither do we." Clara, Lila, and Tess carried their grief like a flame burning at both ends, searing through memory and moonlight. One morning, Clara set a bundle of wild sage on the kitchen table. "Helps with sleep, steadies the heart," she said. Elias Thornfield nodded, pinched a sprig, and tucked it behind his ear. Tessa's lips twitched into a smile, the first in weeks, but Lila's gaze stayed sharp, scanning the hills. The next morning, the air was still, no breeze to stir the dust. A note hung pinned to the barn door, flapping despite the calm. Elias tugged it free. 2 words in a jagged scrawl, "Keep them." He turned, and the sisters stood there, Clara's face pale, Lila's fists tight, Tessa's eyes wide. "You said it didn't matter," Clara whispered. "But it does." Elias's jaw tightened. "You belong here." They turned back to the house, the screen door creaking like a held breath. The morning was quiet, the scrub oaks silent. Inside, Clara traced the frayed hem of her dress. Lila adjusted Tessa's patched scarf, and Tess avoided the hall mirror's gaze, their reflections holding truths they weren't ready to face. Elias's voice came steady from the porch. "We ride at 10. Sheriff's got seed packets for trade, said to grab, 'em before they mold." Clara nodded. Lila tied her braid. Tess clutched her kerchief, blue, green, yellow, ones they'd hung on the line weeks ago. Elias's silence spoke trust he'd never say aloud, shown in waiting as Clara learned to hammer straight, not asking when Lila left supper early, throat tight, or when Tess stared at the garden's barren rose. He handed them the kerchiefs. Dust'll rise soon. They rode together, the sisters sharing a mare, hooves drumming the dirt road. Dustwick's windows glared, its doors whispered shut. Elias tied the reins outside the mercantile, handing Clara a list, flour, oil, nails. You don't know him your story, he said. Lila's grip tightened, but she nodded. Inside, the store smelled of leather and stale spice. The sisters moved carefully, Clara with flour, Lila with oil, Tess with nails. Eyes followed, heavy as heat. Thornfield's girls, someone muttered near the pickle jars. Widow Margaret Hale's laugh was sharp. Can't save every stray. The sisters stayed blank-faced, but Tess's hands shook. At the counter, the clerk hesitated. Got coin? Clara slid over the dollar. He bagged the goods slow, no smile. Outside, noon burned harsh. Clara's hands trembled with quiet fury. Elias joined them calm. You all right? Lila nodded, but the air crackled. As they passed the blacksmith's, Cal Tucker's voice slunk out. Strays ain't welcome here. He leaned on a post, boots too clean. Tavern's hirin' girls, though. Elias kept the mare moving, tipping his hat. Cal pressed. I'm just sayin', you gotta eat somehow. Clara turned, voice low. You hungry for trouble, or just lonesome? Cal's grin faltered. Elias faced him, eyes like flint. Try that again without your pa's name, boy. Cal spit and slunk off. Back at the hollow, the sisters went to the garden, yanking weeds with fierce hands. Elias watched from the porch. Shouldn't have let you go, he said. Lila didn't look up. We needed to. Clara whispered. I hate how they see us, guilty before we speak. Elias sifted dirt. They looked at me like that when my wife died. Like I broke her. Tessa's voice was soft. I don't want it to take years to stop caring. He plucked a burr from her sleeve. Don't let him name you. Clara asked, what name do we take? Yours, he said. Grow into it. That evening, the sisters baked cornbread, dry, slightly burnt. Elias ate like it was a feast. Clara sat taller, Lila's hands steadied, Tess passed the butter. We're going back next week, Clara said. Elias nodded. Days later, Lila found a satchel in the barn, a journal inside with Amara Thornfield in faded ink. A line read, The earth holds mercy, even for the broken. Clara asked about it. Did Amara write much? Elias stared at the fire. Some. Things too kind to say aloud. Lila pressed, You read it? Once. It made me miss her forgiveness. Tess whispered. She believed in new starts. Elias nodded. She did. A knock shattered the quiet, one hard rap. Elias rose, the sisters tense. Sheriff Amos Creed stood outside, hat in hand, dust on his boots. Evenin', Elias. He glanced at the sisters. Need a word. They stepped onto the porch, door creaking shut. Voices murmured low. Elias returned, slower. Town's riled. Another note. Says they'll cut trade if I keep you. Clara's eyes burned. Will you send us off? No, he said. But it'll get rough. Lila nodded. We've seen rough. Elias set Amara's journal on the table. If you're staying, know the woman this house remembers. Clara read. Pain's a seed meant to bloom. She closed it, held it tight, and whispered, We'll try. The next morning, clouds gathered like wolves. Clara looked out. This place cursed? Elias shrugged. Sometimes. Lila asked, You ever think of leaving? I buried her here, he said. Tess nodded. I know. The wind rose, carrying wet earth and pine. By dusk, the storm hit, screaming through the oaks. The barn door slammed, dust falling from rafters. Elias ran to latch it, the sisters following with a lantern. Lightning cracked, thunder growled. The horses stamped. Elias calmed the mare, Clara soothed the colt, Lila checked the stalls, Tess held the light. A board split above, rain pouring in. Tarp? Elias shouted. Lila grabbed it, Clara held the ladder, Tess passed nails. They worked fast, rain stinging, dresses soaked. When the tarp was up, they slumped against the wall, panting. Elias glanced at Clara's bleeding hands. You all right? She nodded, shivering. Just wet. He chuckled. Ain't we all? Silence fell, full but soft. Clara spoke, voice low. I never told anyone what happened. Not the sheriff. Not anyone. Elias waited. Lila continued. Our father didn't die sick. He hung himself after Ma passed. We found him. Tess whispered. We cut him down. Our hands bled. She showed her scarred palms. We buried him alone. Elias exhaled. I don't say it for pity, Clara added. Just needed someone to know. He took their hands, not for comfort, but to see. You can't carry that alone. Lila's voice wavered. I did. Not anymore, he said. Tess looked at him. I don't know how to let someone help. Start by staying, Elias said. Lightning flashed, their shadows stretching like ghosts. The storm faded past midnight. The sisters slept on hay by the tack wall, Elias near the lantern, a book unopened. He saw a rider through the slats, still on a pale horse, watching, then gone. Morning broke soft, the ground tender. The sisters stepped onto the porch, barefoot, hems brushing dew-slick wood. The sky was gray but light. Elias hammered a fence rail. Clara picked up a hammer. Lila and Tess joined, their rhythm wordless. They finished, and Clara pointed to the garden, where sage and wildflowers bloomed. They're taking, she said. Elias nodded. So are you. The town sent no more notes, but voices came. Widow Hale rode up, shawl tight, lips tighter. Heard you let those girls speak for you, she told Elias. Some say that's dangerous. Clara stepped out, wiping her hands. We're right here. Hale sneered. You're owed nothing. Lila tilted her chin. We're not asking. Elias stepped forward. Turn around, Margaret. Her eyes narrowed. Town won't trade with you long. Choose. I have, he said. She left, her silence loud. Later, Sheriff Amos galloped in, mud on his coat. Bite on Hale's boy Cal, swelling bad. Elias nodded. Get Doc Harmon. He's in Redstone till morning, Amos said, eyeing the sisters. Saw you pull roots. You know enough? Clara nodded. Enough. They gathered yarrow, sage, pine resin, and rode fast. Cal lay pale, breath shallow. Hale wrung her hands, eyes wild. Clara knelt, voice calm. Let me touch him. Hale nodded. The sisters worked, Lila boiling water, Tess crushing herbs, Clara wrapping the wound. Hours later, the swelling eased, Cal's breathing steadied. He'll live, Clara said. Hale stared, torn between awe and shame. Elias touched Clara's shoulder. Let's go home. Next day, Hale left flour on the porch. Others followed. Eggs, bolts, cloth, quiet apologies. The sisters unpacked them, Clara asking, Is this forgiveness? Elias poured coffee. It's seeds. You'll see what grows. That evening, they rode to the old cabin by the creek, empty since Amara's death. The door creaked, dust catching light. Elias handed Clara a cloth-wrapped key. You said you didn't know where you belonged. This could be yours. Lila's voice shook. We haven't earned it. You did when you stopped running, he said. Tessa's eyes were full. You sure? He nodded. This cabin's waited for something worth keeping. They sat on the steps, the creek murmuring. Tess asked, Do you miss her every day? Elias paused. Some days, I feel her in the wind, waiting for me to get it right. Clara leaned on the post. We're not her. I know, he said. You're you. That's enough. The land bloomed, not much, but enough to promise more. Clara whispered, Then maybe we'll stay. Elias sat beside them, quiet, like a man who'd learned what the earth had been holding all along. Thank you for watching the video. Please like and subscribe if you love this video, and share your loved on.